February 16, 1963. Dear Mr. Hoover, on August 28, 1962, as spokesman for the local and the national homosexual communities, we wrote you a letter in regard to present policy and practice toward homosexuals. In more than 5 months which have elapsed, we have had neither the pleasure of a response nor even the common courtesy of an acknowledgement. We are sure that similar letters from spokesmen for the nation's Jewish, Negro, Catholic, or other minorities would receive prompt, proper, full, constructive attention and replies. We expect the same. In any case, all American citizens and taxpayers have the right to expect proper replies to letters written to their public officials. Our complaints are valid ones. Our problems are real ones. They will not vanish if you look the other way long enough. When you look back, they will be right there awaiting your proper attention to them. We therefore request a prompt, full and proper, meaningful and constructive reply to our letter of August 28th. We will be pleased to confer with you personally on these matters. Thank you. Sincerely yours, the Mattachine Society of Washington. Franklin E. Kameny, President.
They were pioneers. They were doing what no one else would do.
A lot of people were afraid, and had good reason to.
That was a period of enormously rapid cultural change.
The conservatives damned us to hell. They didn't want any part of our, what they called uppity tactics.
The general view of picketing at the time was that it was something that only weirdos did.
It was the proudest moment of my life to be standing there, to be walking there, and to not be afraid to hold up that picket sign and to say, this is who I am and this is what I stand for, and you need to know that what's being said about homosexuals is a lie.
There had been a big debate within the gay movement about whether or not we should have public demonstrations. And a lot of it was based on the fear we thought, boy, if somebody knew you were gay, they'd stone you to death or, attack you. We didn't dare walk holding a sign saying that we were homosexuals.
See, in those days, people thought it was very much smarter to pass. And that people who didn't want to pass were just inviting trouble.
Nobody, that's not really that much of an exaggerated nobody, was out then. I was probably, certainly for example in my group down here, I was the only person who used my own name.
That was a revolutionary statement for us to say that homosexuals demand equal treatment, equal opportunity, to be judged as individuals.
There was a sense of adventure, danger, uncertainty, how the people who walk by are going to react. When I get back to my parish, how are they going to react? What type of press coverage will there be?
And I went through periods of time where I was afraid I was going to be firebombed. Oh, my name is going to appear in the Washington Post today. Does that mean I'm going to have a firebomb through my window tonight? And yet I did it anyway, but I was always afraid.
Let's go back to the Black Civil Rights Movement. They started it. Mattachine of Washington deliberately took pages out of their book. We emulated them. They did pickets, so did we. So now, what we started has grown, has mushroomed.
Because we are engaged in a fight for the very promise of America. Do not forget our message for the new millennium. Full equality, nothing less. Full equality, nothing less. Full equality, nothing less. Full equality, nothing less.
These are stacks of various gay-related picketing signs from a variety of demonstrations in Washington and also Philadelphia.
Those of us who were early activists back in the early 50s was because of Senator McCarthy. It was McCarthyism which really sparked some organized education and resistance. The first Medici meetings were held in somebody's house in secret. The blinds were pulled, the door was locked. We were afraid the police would arrive at any time. In the European courts in the medieval days, the court jester, who was called the Mattachine, was the one person who would tell the king the truth. And so the word Mattachine meant someone who tells the truth. And so the magazine, or the organization and then the magazine, meant that we're going to be the Mattachine, we're going to tell America the truth about homosexuals.
We had marched with Martin Luther King, 7 of us from the Mattachine Society of Washington in 1963, and from that time on we'd always had our own dream about a march of similar proportions. Well, our first march wasn't on Washington, wasn't exactly of those proportions. There were 10 of us. It was an April morning, and right there on the front page of the Times, it pointed out that Castro was putting homosexuals in concentration camps.
Well, my blood ran cold, because this is the way Hitler began with the Jews and the Gypsies and the political dissidents. I said, my God, they're rounding them up to put them in work camps. What's the next step?
So I called Frank, and I said, I think we should do something. I think we should picket. And he said, well, where? And I said, the White House. And he said, well, this is a Cuban thing. This isn't a White House matter. And I didn't want to be stopped on that. So I said, well, let's make it one.
And our argument was, Cuba is doing this. Is the United States much better in terms of the issues of that day?
And so we couldn't picket in front of the consulate. It had to be 500 feet away, so we decided to pick the White House.
They always put me in the beginning of the march in those days, first of all, because I was 6'3", and I was kind of like an all-American type.
I brought up the back of the line, and the person, a young woman, was just ahead of me, and I could just see that she was tense. And I said, Gail, I bet if I clap my hands, you jump 10 feet in the air.
We were all, held up very proudly and everything. And as I say, I just thought people would ooh and ah, which is basically what they did. But I'm satisfied that we immunized ourselves against fear, and that we made ourselves ready for the next time.
There was one Scandal magazine of the day which had a big article showing all of us picketing there.
This was actually a big media breakthrough at that time, because they gave the name and address of the Mattachine Society. So suddenly we start getting these letters from Iowa and Kansas and Montana. Oh, I've heard about you, I've always wanted to get in touch. In other words, it was a major breakthrough to be exposed in Confidential magazine.
It was a very scary time. What if my boss sees me on the 6 o'clock news and fires me? Or what if my picture appears on the front page of my parents' hometown newspaper and causes grief or shockwaves in the town? And what if some bystander starts throwing insults at us, or worse, bricks or stones? And what is the government going to do with all those photographs and tape recordings that they're taking of us?
So that was our picketing year. Then July 4th was the first of a series of annual demonstrations in Independence Hall.
This is the front of the famous Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and this is where we had gay picketing demonstrations every July 4 from 1965 through 1969.
What we saw it was a chance to remind Americans on July 4th that we were equal citizens. And what better place to do that than in front of the Liberty Bell?
Liberty, we're talking about liberty for gay people.
We are good American citizens demanding our rights.
Independence Hall is where the thing was done. Both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were right there.
But it was a wonderful feeling to be here and to be out facing the public for the first time. We were the first to do this in an organized fashion, to stand up for ourselves. We believed, well, let me put it this way. We were considered weird and sick and perverted and just plain wrong. Even most of the good, straight citizens of this country had been brainwashed into thinking that we were that way. And we felt, no, we are not perverted, we're not sick, we're not weird, and we are not wrong. We are right, and the world is wrong. We had a dress code and we had a conduct code for the picketing demonstrations, and they were very sedate. And it's easy today, 35 years later, to laugh at the rules that we had at the time and make fun of them. But I've strongly supported them at the time, and I still believe that they were right for the time.
Dress and appearance will be conservative and conventional.
Men will wear suits, white shirts, ties.
Women will wear dresses.
When outer clothing is required,
Overcoats, top coats, raincoats will be worn.
Not jackets or other more casual, less formal outerwear.
Picketers will be well-groomed.
men will have recent haircuts and fresh shaves.
Wearing of beards will be discouraged.
Legends on all signs must be approved in advance.
To whatever coordinating machinery is set up for the purpose.
Signs will be neatly and clearly lettered.
Marchers will carry the signs assigned to them.
The order of the marchers and the signs will be established by those in charge of the demonstration.
Signs will always be carried in the designated order.
All inquiries will be referred to a previously designated spokesman or spokesman.
There will be no exchange of remarks between picketers and passers-by.
Conversation and comments among the picketers will be kept to a minimum.
Picketers will neither smoke nor take refreshment on the line.
Picketers will leave the line only when absolutely necessary.
As briefly as possible.
And only a few at a time.
Well, the philosophy was to make us look normal, the way everybody else looked. So we succeeded so well that, as Frank Kameny said, some people thought we were actors.
I remember specifically when we picketed in front of the Civil Service Commission, my approach was, we want them to employ us. Therefore, within the normal mode of the day, we have to give the appearance of being employable.
You know, because we were representing, we felt, all those hundreds of thousands or millions of other Americans that were homosexual.
The idea was to, not for personal self-expression and not for ego and not for big theatrics, but a team effort to get across a very controversial message. And the way you do that is to draw no attention to yourselves, but simply be the bearers of the message, and to have people look at the message on your signs. And when you say homosexuals demand equal treatment, that was revolutionary at the time.
So the homophile pickets started at this moment of radicalization in other social movements, and within a few years, certainly within the lifetime of the annual reminders, the student movement would radicalize, the anti-war movement would radicalize, the women's movement would radicalize. So what we do see in the course of the history of the annual reminders are quite literally demonstrations of the homophile picketers at Independence Hall, respectably dressed, men in jackets and ties, women in dresses and skirts. And down the street, there would be increasingly radical anti-war protests, increasingly radical demonstrations involving a whole series of issues.
You know, we exploded the myth that real homosexuals could possibly look happy and proud and dignified and visible.
While a lot of people came up from Washington, a sizable contingent came down from New York. There were very few Philadelphia people. That was their own backyard. And for Philadelphians, their families and relatives were in Philadelphia and were very likely to see any news reports and television and that sort of thing, whereas for people from other cities, they were much, much less likely to.
All through my participation in the gay civil rights movement, I was public about myself and using my own name, but it wasn't a major single decision. It was always a series of little decisions. And at every step, I felt inside me that I had probably less to lose than most of the other people, the handful of us who were active in the movement. So I said yes at each time, just little incremental steps. But the picketing itself was a major kind of coming out for everybody who took part in it.
Well, I had just graduated from college in '68 when I went to the first of the pickets. I was still living at my father's house, and I remember sneaking off with my girlfriend. Car pulled up from Washington, and I don't even remember where I told Dad I was going, and we drove to Philadelphia. I was the next to the babyest of the group, and mostly I just stayed in the background, helped make the signs, gave people water during the pickets, and just watched all the old folks do their thing. I remember thinking, my God, this is Independence Hall. This is history. I'm really here, and God, it's awful hot.
It was right after the parade, the July 4th parade, and the folding chairs were stacked up still, and then everything had been dismantled, the bleachers, and so then we came on and picketed.
There was always some disapproval. I remember I have a vague recollection of a group of Marines coming by at one time.
There was a photographer there who told me that all I needed was a good man, you know. Or perhaps he even said that all I needed to do was sleep with the man. And I said something like I didn't need that or something, and I just filmed. And he had his camera there, and you'll see that, you know, and he stuck out his tongue at me. Then there were the Secret Service people that stood stolidly by the refreshment stand and, you know, with their microphones and their headsets and cameras. And it wasn't just to see us picketing, but also the messages. And in this case, it was Frank Kammeny's very articulate presentation of what we were all about. And he was never without a doubt. I was never without a doubt, too.
At the end, on a signal, everybody, we had, you know, signs on sticks, and everybody flipped down their signs.
Whatever music that was from the loudspeaker started, and we saw the flag lowering, and we all stood just to show that we were good patriots, and we respected the flag. You know, we were first-class American citizens, and we have wanted, that's a message we had wanted to tell everyone from the beginning. We are first-class citizens. We are not marginal people.
I feel that those demonstrations led directly into Stonewall in '69, and that without our demonstrations starting in '65, Stonewall would not have happened, because what they did was to create the mindset for gay people who had never ever before done this, to demonstrate publicly, to dissent publicly, to do things out in the open. And nobody had ever done this before.
When Stonewall happened, who was it that was on the barricades? It wasn't the intellectual or the retired people or the middle-class people. It were the kids in the street. It were the children of the 60s, the people of the 50s and 60s. In other words, the people that had grown up in an era where homosexuality wasn't quite so taboo, wasn't quite so terrible.
The 69 4th of July demonstration was already being advertised in Greenwich Village at the time that Stonewall happened a few days before. And so that the idea of gay people demonstrating publicly was in the air.
What it was like we had created the gasoline fumes, or I like to say we built the airplane, and those queens from Stonewall just climbed into it and flew off with it.
I noticed immediately, though, the difference between the 68 picket and the 69 picket, and didn't know why until people had told me that there had been a riot a few days earlier in New York.
A lot of people who were fired up by the fight against the police at Stonewall came down to Philadelphia or came from other cities into Philadelphia and joined the demonstration, and it was the largest we had ever had. There were about 150 people. That sounds like very little today, but for us, it was a huge turnout.
I remember that there were many more younger people at the demonstration in '69. There were more people my age. And I remember Frank himself almost having a cardiac when two of the women started holding hands.
We saw a mixture, and it's that like the transition from the old to the new, because people didn't care whether they were accepted or not. You know? Or they didn't want to prove or falsify themselves in any way. I heard people talking in front of me in the picket line about, and these are the old timers, criticizing, criticizing the new freewheeling and the new attire. And there was perhaps a generation gap, a movement generation gap right there, even though it might have been just a few years or no years at all.
You know, it was from dark suits to bell-bottoms and beads, literally, quite literally. And that last picket in Philadelphia in '69 was the cusp, because 3 months later, it was all different.
In late 1969, the decision was made to discontinue the annual reminders and to replace the annual reminders with a march in New York to commemorate the Stonewall riots.
And we all wondered how many would show up. And the march went from the village up to Central Park in New York. And those who were at the head of the line would stand on a tall hill, at the high hill in Central Park, watching to see the people, the waves and waves of people coming up 6th Avenue and coming into Central Park. And we were amazed. We couldn't believe it. There were somewhere, the estimates range between 2,000 and 5,000 people. We had never seen that many gay people in one place before. It was really a turning point.
And so starting in 1970, what became New York City Gay Pride was the focal point, in a sense, for Eastern lesbians and gay men. And I think that's interesting because in some respects we can see the origins of the New York City Gay Pride Parade in the Philadelphia Annual Reminder.
We had cracked the cocoon of invisibility. We had finally stepped forward and said to the public, I am not going to live in a closet anymore. It's stuffy in there, and I am not going to continue to live my life under a rock to protect your feelings. I'm going to live the way I want to, openly and proudly, as a gay person.
The direct legacy of the people seeking equality in front of Independence Hall is those lesbians and gay men in the military who want to be able to serve their country being openly queer and in uniform. That's a very proper movement. The military people in uniform is very proper. They want to show that they salute just as well as the next person does. They want to show that they are as honorable and heroic as any straight soldier ever has been.
what's going on now in terms of gay issues would have been just unimaginable back then.
One of the people who stood tall in 1965, 66, 67, 68, and 69 on our behalf, and who started this movement, who said one person can make a difference, is here with us today. Her name is Lily Vincennes. She's here with her partner.
Sometimes you're the only one that can make a difference at a given point, and then you need to do it. When I stood there, walked and walked in the picket line, I was aware that we were making history and that we were laying the groundwork for what we hoped would be later activism that would give homosexuals equal rights. We met 20 years ago next Sunday, and and we were married 17 and a half years ago by an MCC minister in Key West. That wedding day has been the most important day in my life. I love being a homosexual. So this marriage debate, the gay marriage debate, is a perfect venue to show society at large that we are about love, that we are able to and have been for a long time to live in committed relationships for centuries, I would say. And finally, we are seeking, and we will get, legal recognition. Just a matter of time. Let's hope it's soon.
I now pronounce you partners in life. Congratulations.
Visibility has always been the keystone of our struggle for civil rights. We were pushing for equality through visibility. Today we have visibility. Oh, how do we have visibility? It is so wonderful.
The idea of 4,000 gay couples lined up in front of the San Francisco City Hall, all in effect declaring themselves as gay, just would have been inconceivable in the 60s and even into the 70s and 80s and the beginning of the 90s.
Many of these people who are now coming forward out of the closet and demanding their civil rights and their equality are people who may never have thought of themselves as activists and not been active participants in formal organizations in the movement. But suddenly it hits home. They're after me. They don't want me to have my rights. They don't want me to have my equality. And I'm going to demand it. And they come forward.
The momentum is there, and that is not going to be stemmed. It's moved from hopes for a grassroots movement to the actuality of a grassroots movement. And it's taken 40 years to do it.
We are now part of the landscape of America.
Gay Pioneers is a co-production of WHYY and Equality Forum.